the slideshow up for us. Let me share my screen. All right, Brendan, you got it.
Hold on one second. Is everybody on there? Is everybody showing their visual? Everybody that can?
Yeah.
Is that a correction? Or is that?
Looks like I see Allison, Janae, Denari. If you guys could all join video.
Looks like Chemical also.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You ready to go? Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining us this second session of the Limitless podcast Incubator. Extremely excited to have you guys back with us today. And we're going to dive into it. We really just want to maximize this first hour that we have. We have two very, very special guest speakers that are joining us today. More than just being guest speakers, they're partners with the Limitless podcast Incubator. They're advisors to the program as well. Our very first speaker is someone who I'm extremely proud to call a good friend and business partner. He is the co-host of Fox Sports 1's hit show, Speak for Yourself. He's an entrepreneur, a multimedia brand ambassador, a philanthropist. He's the founder of Project Transition, which is his nonprofit organization. He's a proud husband, father of 4, and he's also an absolute pillar in the community. Marcellus Wiley joins us today, and he's going to give you a quick overview and journey, or give you a snapshot of his journey as to how he became the successful businessman and media brand that he is today. So students, we're going to take some questions once Marcellus wraps up and Ryen wraps up. So if you have questions, we're going to save them for the final 15 minutes of the hour, and we'll get your questions in. And so be sure to write them down in between time. Marcellus, you can step in and give us an overview.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. It's great to be here right now, just to watch this come to fruition, being a partner with Project Transition, my foundation, but also with the Limitless podcast Incubator. Another dream come true in terms of hopefully making your dreams a reality as well. I guess to take you back to the beginnings of my interest in media, my interest in being a personality on air, really started in my bathroom growing up. And I didn't know at the time, I was the 8-year-old, 9-year-old. My father somehow, some way saved up and bought one of those old school camcorders, like, you know, the old school over the shoulder tops. And he told me as soon as he brought it home, I could never touch it. So, you know, as a youngster, that means as soon as you're not looking, I'm touching it. I'm grabbing it, daddy. And then he had a tripod too. So my father would film my Pop Warner games, my track meets, et cetera. And we would sit there and watch it, not so much in the coaching session, but just really in enjoyment. Like, wow, we can actually capture what happened in reality and watch it back forever. So I didn't get much of any tidbits or any teaching lessons from my dad, just really the enjoyment of, wow, we did this earlier and we're watching it now. But then some of those clips at the end, he started to notice weren't properly edited. And the track meet would end and the football game's supposed to start. And in the middle of that, he would see me in the bathroom just talking into the camera or rapping into the camera, just really expressing my personality on camera. Because I was amazed as well, like, wow, it's capturing everything I do, like the stars I see on television. So I would set that tripod up and I ride my little BMX Huffy bike and do a ramp over a milk carton, milk crates, and water hoses. And my dad, once again, we're watching the track meet. In between the track meet and the edit to the football game, here I go. I'm on this bike or I'm in the bathroom once again talking. And that's really how it all started for me. I always had an interest in just conveying message. Whether it's being in class, I was the guy who would pay attention, front row, hands up. I was the biggest nerd. But then after class or after school, my friends would ask me a question or two, and I just loved to express what I knew. And I never was the friend that was like, why don't you pay attention when she was talking or anything like that. I actually enjoyed it. And I give you these building blocks because it helps you find your voice, because it lets you know what your path is. So for me, I continue to evolve that. I get to the NFL, I'm a professional athlete. And the first thing that caught me off guard was how many rookies and how many veterans as well were already tired of the business of the NFL. Many of them went to big schools. I didn't. I went to Columbia, small school, Ivy League. So when I got to the NFL, I relished the moment to talk to the media. I relished the moments that were coming and associated with big time football, NFL football. A lot of my teammates, they were exhausted, fatigued, tired of beat writers, tired of always being in the paper, tired of always being on television, tired of the criticism, everything that comes with the business of football. And that was a little shocking to me, because I was opening up to something that my teammates were closing up to. Why did that make a big difference in my life? Is because all of a sudden I started to cultivate relationships with media members. I was likable. I would give them more than just the typical answer in mumble form, and we've seen so many athletes give. And I was a guy who was really open and would say not only more than they wanted, but maybe too much. And I was just candid. And I cultivated those relationships to the point where when I was retired after playing 10 years in the NFL, I look around and I thought I was going to live the retired football player's dream, which was just golf, party, and look at my bank receipts. And I did that for like almost a year. Then I got so bored, and I felt like I didn't have like any participation to greater society of the world. I just felt like I had robbed the world. I played a child's game till I was 32, and it was good to me. And now I'm just going to sit back, get fat, and enjoy it. And I was like, that's not enough in life. So those relationships that I had cultivated all those years, they kept knocking on my door. They kept calling me. They kept saying, hey, let's do an interview. And finally that turned into ESPN calling me one day and said, could I do an interview for Halloween? Random interview. And I turned that random interview into working with ESPN for 11 years. And I turned those 11 years into now being at Fox and Fox Sports for the last 2+ years. And it all started in that bathroom. It all started with me sneaking away with that camcorder and that tripod. And for me, I guess if I had any advice, because I don't know your path, but I think it's important for you to know your path, to know what is sparking this passion, what is sparking that interest. Start there. And then the only other piece of advice I would really offer is to find your voice. And the best thing about your voice is that it's unique to you. No one else has it. No one else can duplicate it with authenticity. No one. They can try. They can sound like a broadcaster and say, oh, I'm sounding like Ryen, Russillo, or Marcellus, Wiley, but it's not the same. Find your voice. And that's not just how you say your words. It's how you construct your stories, how you construct your analysis, how you really want to express yourself. And that was the only thing that I really honed in on once I became a professional. How am I going to say it? And if you are authentic to your voice, you will stand apart from others. If you try to be a broadcaster, if you try to be a communicator, if you get to the mic and want to wax poetic like you've seen it before, I don't know if that's going to last. It may have impact at first, but I don't know if that's going to be everlasting. So through all of my ups and all my downs through this business, it's an amazing experience. I always joke with people. I said I would have skipped playing professional football and went straight to the media if I knew I could do it, because it doesn't hurt. There are no surgeries. There are no games. You get off the field and get off the set and you're feeling like, oh, got to call the doctor. It's such a great, tremendous passion of mine. And I'm just so blessed to be able to do that. So I really am in living another dream in terms of setting a goal and achieving that goal and forever trying to attain the next level within that goal. So someone that I actually respect fully, is one of my favorites in this industry, is actually on this Zoom meeting with us. And I'd like to introduce him. His name is Ryen Russillo. And Ryen Russillo, being a partner with the Limitless Incubator podcast, and knowing him for so many years as a friend and as a friend that I've looked up to and revered in terms of how he expresses himself. There's no better partner to take this journey with than Ryen Russillo. He's been one of the most recognizable faces and names in this business, and he continues to do great things. So Ryen, if you could, drop a gem or two for everyone at Limitless.
Yeah, everybody can hear me all right, right? I'm just making sure. I'm over here in a hotel back in the Northeast. So, I met Marcellus a long time ago at ESPN. He was a guy I really loved as a player, and I'll never forget the first TV show we did together. My agent talked me into doing it because it was a great opportunity, which just meant I was going to be free. And Marcellus and I were up there doing this ABC show, and for the life of me, I couldn't hit the touch screen the right way. And Marcellus was so nice to me. Like every time I do the touch screen, I screwed it up. And in the middle of a live TV show, Marcellus just goes, "My gosh, Ryen, you're just terrible at this." And, and it's one of those moments where, like, even when you're on the air, you're going to have some challenges. And a lot like Marcellus, you kind of grow up, and it's weird. You'll get older and you'll understand like the root and the foundation of some of your interests. And like he was talking about with the camcorder, I used to go outside and play these basketball games where I would narrate everything in my head, not just call it, but all the storylines. And I keep track of everyone's score. And I put myself on the Sixers, and Charles Barkley had like 200 points. My father was like, "How did Barkley have 200 and you had 0?" And I was like, "I'm hurt. I'm not available right now." But look, there was definitely a gap. And this is one of the things I want to talk more about here, because us on-air people can be a little long-winded. But, when I was at school, I didn't study broadcasting. I didn't really even know that it existed as an opportunity. I didn't play any sports at a level. I didn't play any games anybody cared about, is probably the best way to put it. And, eventually I just kind of decided, like, why not me? Like, why can't I try some of this stuff? And, one of the things that I loved about this business is that there's really no bad day. Everybody has challenges no matter what kind of career you have, but your worst day when you're doing something you love is one of the greatest gifts ever. And it's not easy. It's certainly hard pursuing some of these careers, but luckily enough, from a guy that was bartending to 14 years at ESPN. And then I left ESPN a year or so ago, which certainly isn't easy to do, but it's worked out. And with a private podcast company that's now part of Spotify, where I'm sure a lot of you guys get your music from, that's what we've been doing. And I've been lucky enough to probably be one of the top podcasts as far as sports are concerned in the country. But it just started with a lot of people around me going, it's a weird thing. Like, other people will give you bad advice. Sometimes it's people that are very close to you because they care about you and they don't want to see you struggle. But a lot of times it's people that maybe aren't the most positive influences, and they themselves aren't brave enough to try some of these things, and they'll discourage you. I mean, it happened to me constantly when I was younger. I mean, and just now moving to Los Angeles 2 years ago, I wanted to become a writer. And I had people that were really professional friends going, "What the hell's wrong with you? Are you crazy? Like, why would you do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe it's a bad decision." But it's funny how often the advice isn't encouraging. It's almost these obstacles that people want to put up in front of you because they never had the guts to go ahead and do some of this stuff. So look, I've interviewed everyone, not every single person, but like Kobe, Tiger, Denzel Washington was one of the coolest ones ever. I mean, Van Pelt and I don't know how many of you watch SportsCenter, but he's been on ESPN for 20 years now, the big bald guy who was 6'7", so everybody thought I was about 5'6". No offense to anyone that's 5'6" on the call, but I was, but it's been a really, really fun thing getting to meet different people, experience different ways of thinking. But I think if there's one message throughout all of this, and you may not end up pursuing exactly this career, but it's the mindset of getting out of like, well, I can't do that. Or like when I went to college, I didn't know about investment banking. I thought being a banker was working as a teller. I didn't know about these investment firms. I didn't know anything about the stock market. I didn't know any of this stuff. I grew up working construction. And when finally I got my mindset to change to think, well, why can't I do some of these things? If this guy can do it, why can't I do it? And once you start thinking that way, man, it's really an incredible way to see the world and think that there are all these opportunities out there for you. And again, even if this specific thing that we're doing here in this program isn't exactly what you want, I think the biggest lesson would be going, well, hell, like there's just stuff everywhere. And why would I put up barriers in front of myself? Because that really, I think, is a big part of success. So I'm fired up to do this, guys. So thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Awesome. So full disclosure, Marcellus and Ryen, prior to, we did a little bit of prep, obviously, before jumping on this podcast. And prior to jumping on the podcast, two of our instructors actually were mad at themselves for not showing up with their Laker gear.
Hold my screen. Bye.
Yeah. So they said, oh, we got the top Clipper cat here and the top Boston cat here, and we're not representing. So
just ask them when's the parade.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
When's the
Oh,
parade?
look at that. Salty.
Yeah. So Cameron, I'll let you jump in. I know we're going to have some Q&A right now for the students. Cameron, you can actually kind of kick it off just with some of the key questions you wanted to get answered for the team.
Sure. I'm Cameron. I'm one of the instructors for this program. There's just a couple questions I wanted to get out there, being that you guys both have so much experience in this realm, and me as an instructor, not as much. What are some of the keys to creating engaging content? And I can go to both of you guys.
Yeah, that's a funny one for me. I may not be the best person to answer that question because it's almost like a collision of two worlds for me. There's a world that exists where you know what will get engagement. Some of those things are salacious. Some of those things are hot takes. Some of those things you know that people will be involved. But some of the, I guess the standard ones, if you say anything Dallas Cowboys, it's going to rate more than if you say something Jacksonville Jaguars. If you say anything LeBron, it will rate more than if you say anything Devin Booker, despite Devin Booker being a beast and despite Jacksonville being an actual NFL team. There are disparities there. So in terms of engagement, there are some principles like certain people, certain teams, and even sometimes in locales, certain areas, you can create greater engagement. But then it gets into like how you deliver it. And that's an interesting place for me because I don't waver too much in terms of how I'm going to give my content based on it creating engagement. That feels like to me sometimes chasing my own tail, and in terms of I know what they want, so let me just give them what they want and hopefully this works. Mm-hmm. I actually just give them me because that's how I'm going to consistently give it to you. Like I can recreate me all the time versus recreate some version that I think you like. And then what if your interests change? What if your sensibilities change? What if that doesn't come off as authentic? What does that look like? And, this business is about betting on yourself, but also betting on your future in terms of how you're going to stay in this game. I came in this game with so many people that now are not in it for various reasons, but the ones who sustain their not only place in this business, but sustained excellence, to me, seem like they're reliable. If you go to them, they're going to be who they are. So in terms of engaging content, I mean, look, if you light yourself on fire and run down the plaza, I'm sure you get a few hits. But is that what you're really seeking right there? So that's my little 2 cents.
Right. So what I'm hearing there is maybe to the students not chasing the engagement, but just being authentic and having the authenticity and trusting that your authentic self will, draw who it's supposed to draw. We'll turn it over to Ryen. Same question.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man, because, Marcellus, the thing I've always liked about him is that even though he's a former player and he's a West Coast guy, I mean, we already have these preconceived notions of everything. So it's like, former NFL guy. So he's going to say football is the best. He's going to always stick up for players and arguments. He's always going to be, and he doesn't do that. He surprises you at every turn. I'm sure, hey, there's Russillo, Boston guy. Look at him. He's going to think this, this, and this. And that's just not always the case. Like you do want to stay, like Marcellus is himself, I'm myself. We've worked with people that understand the game. Not that they understand it better than us, but they know how to play it. And as you'll probably learn, and it's not even just sports, like there's certain people, just opinion people in these platform businesses where I know what I could say to get a ton of hits. I could send a tweet right now to get 1,000 retweets if I just want to say something stupid. Like I can do it. I just don't want to do it because then you're. And this is actually like a more philosophical thing. You can just decide to be an entertainer, and it works for some people, and it works for a long time. And there's not necessarily something wrong with that. I personally would look at that guy and go, all right, does he really believe this? And even when I wasn't on the air or anything and I was watching, I sort of just was more like, I'd be more in tune with the guy who I felt was genuine all the time. So, that's not really something we have to worry about right now. But if you're looking at like, hey, this is exactly what I do and how I want to carve out the business, it's a very tough battle with how do I get noticed or how do I build up credibility? Because there's plenty of people that get noticed that have no credibility. And I'll look at them and think, okay, well, this guy just decided early on he was going to make the deal with the devil. And it may work for your career, but it was definitely from day one for me, I was like, I just can't do it because it's hard to keep track of stuff when you're just making it up all the time.
Yeah. So Skip Bayless, that's what you're talking about?
You stupid. Who said Stephen A? Stop talking about Stephen A. Not Stephen.
No.
Look, I'll tell you, I like Stephen A. a lot more than Skip. I'll just be on the record with that one. So
I won't argue with you there. No, I think we're hearing some recurring themes from both Marcellus and Ryen. You can do the things to chase the engagement, but I think what's lasting and what's really going to give you the impact. And when we speak about engaging content, something that's going to draw in a true fan base, I think it's that authenticity. One other question I want to ask you both is, being that you guys are both in this space, what are some obstacles that you faced or obstacles that can be expected? And perhaps what are some ways that they can kind of plan for those or avoid those types of obstacles?
Yeah, for me, I think the more challenging times are when you feel that the show that you're on, the platform you're on, especially if you're with an ensemble, with other co-hosts or other guests that are on that same platform, is the show calling the right plays for you? So much of this is produced, and so much of this is just, hey, you go out there and give us your version of this topic with infinite latitude. But we still have restrictions in sort because of we got to produce the show. We know every question that happens pretty much before it happens. Are they calling the right place for you to shine your brightest? I think at first, me being a former player and an NFL player, defensive end, I was just getting in this really narrow box of just talk about 3rd and goal, and let's talk about just what happens in the huddle and what happens under a pile. And my personality was never going to be boxed in. And it was interesting. I started off on NFL Live. You can't get more X's and O's pretty much than NFL Live. And 2 weeks in, the boss of this coordinating producer, Seth Markman, calls me in his office. He's like, Marcellus, you're not long for this show. And I was like, really? He was like, nah. He's like, your personality is different than this show. He said, but that's a good thing. But for right now, we need you to do the plays that we're calling and then figure out how you're going to go out there and make the plays you want. And we had a great relationship because he understood that I didn't want to be boxed in just to be that NFL analyst. That was a challenge. Also, a challenge is what Ryen was speaking of. What if you're working with someone who checked a different box and how they're going to approach this than you are? I've people who don't prepare the same as I prepare, and I try not to judge them until you're on air and something happens and you're like, oh, you weren't prepared. And then we have this friction, this dissension, and it really comes from me. The only way I can get out of this is either make them prepare better or let the world know that we're only having this issue because they're not prepared, which I don't want to sell them out, but that's where I'm at. So sometimes you have that, someone who's in it, not for the same reasons you're in it. Mm-hmm. Lastly, it's really just how to gain audience. And for me, one of the criteria for gaining audience is that I have to be a person that likes my content as well. Like Ryan was saying, I can't do something and then see my wife, see my family, see my kids, and I'm like, oh goodness, I just did that for the check, or I just did that for the clicks or the likes. So to make sure that you're in position and in alignment with people that can support that. And that's tough when you're climbing up the hill, because as Ryan said, when you first start off, you pretty much want to take anything and any opportunity just to get the ball rolling. So to have that balancing act of what you really want to do in integrity versus what opportunities are presented is always a tricky one.
Right. So students, what I'm hearing there is one thing, be a good co-host. Be the co-host that you would want for yourself. Don't leave your co-host out there to dry. Prepare, and also, kind of have an idea of, do I even like this content that I'm creating? Because if you don't like the content, there's a good chance that people outside of you are not going to like it. So watch back your content, critique yourselves, and we'll critique you as well as we go on to each of the weeks. But make stuff that you would want to see yourself. Ryan, same question.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on something quick there that you said, though, because throughout this, and you're going to hate it, everyone hates their own voice. It's unbelievable. Like, no one likes their own voice. People with great voices hate listening themselves back. But in the beginning, you have to listen, because the learning experience you're going to get from like, oh, wait, I need to do that better. I didn't make that point strong enough. I mean, I still do it now, where I listened to something I did the other day and I go, you know what, that was like a B, and you're capable of an A there. And I know already, the next time through, and it's good to kind of refresh that. So I'm actually try not to get too freaked out when we go through that part of the process of listening back to your actual audio. As far as obstacles, for me, it was different. Marcellus comes in with a lot of credibility. I look at the industry now and where I was, and the obstacles are entirely different. There was no podcast. There was no, look, we're talking a couple years into the internet when I first started. So I would look up, not even email addresses, physical addresses of every professional sports team in football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. And I wrote a letter. I had a form letter, which I'm so glad I don't think anybody could ever find, because it's so embarrassing. I'm 25, 26, I'm bartending, I'm living above a restaurant, I'm still in the town I went to college in. And it's like, you're kind of starting to become one of those guys where you're like, still here, man. Like, congrats on graduating and everything. But like, usually people leave after they graduate. So, I just was like, look, I'm going to work in sports. I'm going to figure it out. I didn't really want to be on the air. But the obstacle then was, that first job to be on the air, from when I started the process to when I actually got one, was like 3 years. I'm living check to check. Rent was due when they showed up to get it. I wasn't paying it on the first if I didn't have to. And, it was just so hard. It was so hard. The only reason I got on the air is because this minor league baseball team that was in Trenton, New Jersey, wasn't even AAA, it was AA. And at least it was on the East Coast, so it was going to be easier to move to. They were like, look, you have a deep voice. We'll let you call a couple middle innings. And they only did it to mess with the other guy because his contract was up. And it was a joke. It didn't even make any sense. My father thought I was lying to him. And so even though I didn't really even care about being on the air, I knew, okay, because I had interned at a TV station a couple years prior. And then I had this gap where in 99, I thought to get on the air. And, I had my terrible demo tape like everybody else had. I'm wearing sick khakis with a polo, and I'm walking around going, kayaking is a sport that's often overlooked. It's just terrible, and nobody even wanted to look at it. So the obstacles I had then, like, they don't exist. And that's what's so great about right now is if you want to be on the air, you can be on the air tomorrow. With everything that we've set you up with here, you have the capabilities to be on the air within hours. Now, your obstacle is that back when nobody would let anybody on the air, the line I like to use is the line back then was longer but thinner, and now the line is incredibly short, but it's really wide because everybody can be on the air tomorrow. So your obstacles as you go through this, if this is something you really want to pursue, is that the competition is way harder. But I would rather have the opportunity to be heard and start the process and harass people about coming on and all that kind of stuff than just to be on. I was on ice for like 3 years. And that was a whole time where I still wasn't sure if I wanted to be on the air. So then you take it from minor league baseball to a terrible talk show in Boston for 3 years to, a tryout at ESPN. And really the only reason I got in there to fill in on shifts is they were so unorganized. Like Marcellus could tell you, ESPN's amazing. I grew up with it, but then once you're there every day, you're like, I can't believe the place gets stuff on TV sometimes. Like this is, and I think every industry is probably like that, like up close, even football. I'm sure Marcellus has had coaches where I'm like, I can't believe this guy is an NFL coach. So that's not unique to ESPN. So I don't want to sound critical. It's just that there are elements to it where you go, what is going on? So I was getting called to fill in all the time because people constantly kept screwing up the schedule. And I didn't care. Like I wasn't going to start a family. I mean, the dating thing was really bad because I was like, sorry, I got to drive to Bristol right now. Maybe that was an excuse I'm using, but you know, look, I just would rather, I mean, it's so amazing the opportunity you have. So I don't even know if I like the word obstacle anymore because the obstacles that existed in this industry 10, 20 years ago just are not there now. And I think that's great.
Great. So students figure out a way to stand out amongst the crowd. There's a lot more people in the space now, but you have an opportunity to create engaging content. I now want to turn over to the students. I know you guys probably have questions you'd like to ask of our guests as you guys begin to prepare your own podcasts. So I'll turn over to the group. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Oh, Caleb, I know Caleb has a question.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start it off. I had one from Marcellus. I was listening to you in your story about your dad and the tripod and the whole, I listened to the whole story. I had a question on if you thought that helped you develop a closer relationship with your dad. The reason I ask is because I'm launching a podcast with my dad on November 19th. So I wanted to use your story as an example.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I mean, our relationship is still strong. I'm blessed that he's still here. And we were talking yesterday. He's the biggest sports fan ever. To the irony of me being a sports commentator, I grew up almost saying one thing I would never do is talk sports because all my dad does is talk sports. Like, I literally would come home and dad was like, Dad, I got a good report card. He was like, yeah, let me see that. I'm like, oh, you got an A here. Oh, a couple A's and a B. You know, speaking of B and the Buffalo Bills, and he would just go into, I'm like, Daddy, wait a second, back to the report card. Anything would trigger him to go right to football or to any sport. And it's funny, still to this day, I could come to my dad right now. I say, Dad, all these kids, and they're falling down and they're stressing us out. And, oh, man, we needed just a little break. And my dad's like, yeah. It's funny, those breaks, man. It's like a bye week in the NFL when the guys get a break. I'm like, Daddy, we're talking about family. My daddy will transition with the best of them to sports, no matter what the topic. But there are so many amazing elements to the dynamic of a father-son. So I like the concept, the premise of what you guys are doing. And some of those are layups, you know, just the fact that you guys are from different generations and how your outlooks are different. But I think what really separates you is to let each other talk in their own world, their own realm, and not necessarily diss that world or put that world down, but then find the commonalities of that era and this era, and then find how there are things that are similar, even though they're dressed up differently. So, you know, now I'm the guy who love rap music so much that I didn't even get spankings anymore. My mom would just take my rap tapes. She was like, the thing that disciplines him the best is if I say, give me your tapes. And she knew it. To now, you know, I DJ'd my whole life. To now, I don't even really listen to rap music that much because I got kids walking around here and they can't hear all that. And it's just hilarious. I became what my father was because when I first started listening to rap, who's this Kumo D you're talking about? You know, so you become them in a funny way. So I like the premise of that. But yeah, our relationship is strong because of really that sports bond, that core bond that we have and just communicating with each other.
Yeah, that's cool that you talk about raps too, because my dad used to be a rapper. so
a rapper we know? A rapper we know?
No.
Okay. It counts.
He didn't blow like that, but I was the same way. Like I would walk around listening to his music and other music, 50 Cent, Lil Wayne, all those type of guys. But he never took it away from me. He grew up in South Central too. I knew you grew up.
Yeah.
So like my grandma would take his tapes too. And then like when he got around me, he didn't hide it from me. And that's how I was like, I listen to Lil Wayne, listen to all those rappers. I watched like Love and Hip Hop at a young age. I got put on the Vlad interviews at a young age, so I seen you on Vlad.
Right. Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, you guys I really want you both to have the freedom to express how you guys saw the world and how the world was given to you and how you internalize all of those elements. I think that's interesting because so many times we get into this like almost battle rap, even in our world, when you have these shows where it's argumentative. And I tell my co-hosts, I don't want to be a debate show. I don't want to compete against you. I want to compliment you. So I say something, you say something. Where's the new ground from us saying that? But if we just get binary, for me, it gets a little exhausting and fatiguing pretty fast. I like to build and get to a new discovery rather than just compete, say which one was better.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, unmute yourself, Michael, and ask your question.
You hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I see that box right there. Let me see that again. That was went way back. Let me see that. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
You breaking up, Mike?
Yeah, I can't hear.
Just put it in the chat. I'll go ahead and ask you, Michael, because you're breaking up.
Yeah, put it in the chat, Mike, and then we'll ask the question.
He did. I'll go ahead and ask it. His question was, when choosing content, if your topic is seasonal and has a very niche audience, how do you navigate keeping content coming in during off season and maintaining and attracting more audience?
Hello?
Man, that's a really good question. That in itself has evolved quite a bit. I think right now, the stuff that's more dramatic is the stuff that's better to talk about. Early on, a team has a winning streak and you would go, wow, this team's winning. Like, okay, now what? I still have 9 minutes left in the radio segment. And it's very different than, say, Sports Center where, okay, this team's winning a bunch of games in a row. Let's make sure we talk about what they've done. And then it's a graphic and then it's on. And when it's a discussion, it is a really simple rule. Whenever something's happening in sports, you go, okay, but what is the actual topic? So if the team were winning, let's say an NFL team were winning, but it was a backup quarterback, say Ryan Tannehill taking over for Mariota, okay, now we have something. Now we have a topic. As far as seasonal stuff, back to the dramatic point, off-season stuff has never been hotter. My ratings during July and August years ago, they were like, if you want to take extra time off, go ahead. That's how bad those numbers were for all of our shows. But the NBA part of it, going back to, well, it's not just 10 years ago with LeBron, but I'd say a couple years ago with Durant first leaving OKC to go to Golden State, that's when you started seeing guys would come down from the ratings each week and go, this NBA offseason stuff is rating better than some of our regular season NBA stuff. But if you're going to do sports, football is king. But I think even if you're not totally in tune with sports, like you can think what People Magazine puts on the cover. Think what People Magazine will put on social media so that you click on it. Think of all these different media companies that are trying to get you to click on the same stuff. And as Marcellus had said with the Dallas Cowboys, like you can have a niche thing that you're really excited about, but you have to make that topic, you have to make that segment so unique and so special for somebody to go, okay, wait a minute, Cowboys, LeBron, Lakers, drama, done. No baseball works, by the way, anymore nationally.
No.
Unfortunately, but you have to, there are some rules. Like I remember, at one point I was arguing with a manager about a show segment, and I go, would you rather me do a bad NFL segment than a pretty good basketball segment? And he was like, yes. He's like, exactly. So, you don't want to be, it's okay to break the rules sometimes, it's okay. And if you're thinking of like, hey, I want to do this topic, like I wouldn't worry too much about the seasonal part of it. But if you're doing it regularly, if you're doing it as a career, if you're doing multiple podcasts a week, like I had a guy who wrote this book about movies. I had this positive thinking coach on Wednesday. but that's because I knew I was doing all football in another 48 hours. So you don't want to be the guy that's too unique and doing too obscure things, but don't be afraid of it every now and then. It's just, you got to make it a little bit better than the average segment.
Okay. Kamiko, she had a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Kamiko.
In your position where you're in a position where you're asked for your opinion and how it's received can be detrimental to your career. How do you navigate that while being true to who you are?
Good question. For me, it's an expression of who I am. And once I sign off on it, because that's who I really am, I'm comfortable with it. The only other thing I have to respect is that I'm on air and I can't be profane. I can't curse. I can't go that far. And in my real world, real life, real conversations, I would be more explicit, more direct in that way. But other than that, in terms of the core principles of what I'm saying, it's the same that I would say on air and off air. So I don't get into that hot water. Some do, some want to. And then it's that, like, there is a way that even the most innocent of us broadcasters can be misconstrued, because everything's clickbait now. So our attention span is shorter than it's ever been. And with that said, they will manipulate and they will reconstruct what you say, or only highlight a part of what you say, convey a greater message that is to their agenda. And that happens all the time. So you could just take someone's soundbite, like LeBron probably just hates everything because he says anything and it goes exactly where someone else with an agenda wants it to go, and not in totality. Kanye West is interesting too. I mean, a lot of people are like, ooh, Kanye, but they never give you beginning to end Kanye. And a lot of times, if you've ever kind of did some dig deep and went into one of them rabbit holes and like, let me hear what he really said in fullness, you're like, interesting. That's not the same as the headline, and it's certainly not the same as the click. So I think for the friends and the co-hosts that I've had that have gotten in hot water, it's almost like when I played football, you heard the whistle and you knew not to hit him, and you knew that you could hit him, but it would take you to make a conscious decision to hit him. But then you're like, but I'm so close to him, I could play it off if I get caught, like, hey, I couldn't stop. And then you get the flag. I think the same thing happens in our world. We know when we're like, yo, we're in, this water temperature is a little hot, a little testy here. And then there's a moment of truth where you're like, should I say that? Should I go there? And you're like, well, we're already so close to it. Why not take one more step? And you take that step, and then the reaction throws a flag at you. You're like, what? And then you try to play it off. So I do find a parallel in there. Everyone knows when it's like chill time. I never cursed around my grandmother and my teachers because I knew I'd be in trouble. But I cursed all the time around everybody else. I know when to turn it on and off. It's my basic point. So if you don't, you might find yourself in hot water.
Ryan, do you want to add to that at all?
The biggest rule is never make it personal. You know, if you don't like someone, you don't like a team, you don't like a player, you don't like, you know, even a performer or something like that, especially when you're working at a place like ESPN or Fox, where you're a big, you know, it's a global brand. You don't want to make it personal. You don't want to name call and that kind of stuff, because it just doesn't go over well. Even if you're right. You know, I've been close a couple times. I think I said something, you know, when I was a lot younger, I probably had a little bit more edge to me. And you know, I got called into the principal's office and they said, you know, that thing you said about that guy, even if you're right, you can't do it that way. And I was like, why, did somebody care? And they were like, yeah, the CEO was driving around Orlando listening. And I was like, oh my God. Like one of the 10 most powerful businessmen in the country happened to be listening while I insulted somebody. So And then it was funny because the boss was like, well, now he knows who you are, but just don't do it again this week. All right. So, not making it personal, but Marcellus makes a good point because you're aware of it all. I've been close. I've had a few things happen with me. I'm like, well, that's not what I said. And you can fight it, but you sort of lose that one when you even try to fight it. I think the biggest thing is not let it, and a lot of us that are on the air, we don't do a great job with this because our roles have changed with the access to all of the criticism. And I could get complimented 1,000 times, and the one time it's the wrong day and it sticks to you a little bit. I don't care who you are. Most of us are more sensitive than we'd like to admit. And I don't even really get it as bad as some other people that are in our business where it is constant, but a lot of that they probably brought on themselves at some point. But you don't want to start talking to this audience you don't want to appease the people that don't already like you. You know what I mean? And notice that with some of the people that are on the air more and more, they're worried about the social media reaction actually making a good point. And not everybody's you don't want to get into this and be like, I hope everyone likes me. Because then you've already, look, man, we're opinion people. Marcellus is an opinion guy. I've had opinions on things. I'll meet somebody and be like, oh, I listened to you for 10 years, but I can't believe you said that about Minnesota football. I'm like, all right, so you liked me for a decade and I said something about the Gophers and now you're done with me? Like what happened to all the chips I had stacked up over the years? So when you start to worry about that kind of stuff, it can actually get in the way of you and your end goal of just being good and having a voice and figuring out how to say some things. So, I would say pay as little attention to that stuff as you can, even though it is all out there.
Really, really quick, guys. So we have about 10 more minutes for question and for Q&A. So if you have questions, let's try to get them in. Does anybody else have any questions?
I think Michael has a second question, but I want to get some.
Are there any in the chat? I didn't get a chance to look at the chat.
Yeah, Mike has one in the chat, but what about some of our middle schoolers? I want to get you guys involved. See Denari over there smiling. I'm sure you.
Yeah, Denari has a question.
Allison?
Sure. A question I have is, when you first started out, were you scared?
That's a good question.
Put your camera on, please, Allison.
Was I scared? I don't know. There's an energy. There's an anxiety. There's like a buildup to get you on edge to perform. The same thing in football, but football was different because I knew physically I would feel it. I knew that when I walked into the stadium, that was the last moment of that day that I was going to feel that good. No matter how much I played, how well I played, if we killed them, I would not feel as good walking out as I did walking in. That's not this. So there was a little fear in football because you can also exaggerate that. And sometimes you've seen it where guys have season-ending injuries or career-ending injuries. So that's a different fear. This was, I want to express and convey who I am at the best level I can. I want to optimize my talent in this conversation, in this show right now. And you never do. You're never perfect. You're never exactly, you drive home, you're like, oh, I didn't even say that point. Oh, I stumbled over that. And so I wouldn't go fear because the consequences aren't there like they are in some other occupations. But I will say there is this 3, 2, 1, that light pops on and your hairs are like, what's up? And they're standing up and your eyes are like, I can tell there's an adrenaline to it for sure. And that's why so many former players love this, because you won't find that adrenaline rush pretty much anywhere else out there on the daily. So I would say I get excited, but fear, camera can't hurt me.
Allison, that's an awesome question because it's an important one to understand. I was scared to death my first ESPN show. They called me up, and back then, if you were young, they were like, "We don't want to hear from anybody young," and that's another great thing that's happened. At 30 to be on ESPN was actually young for radio, and so they said, "Hey, we heard your tape, we like you." I think it was just the deep voice guys, so I lucked out. But they were like, "Have you ever been by yourself before on radio, solo?" Okay, which is way harder than any of this other stuff. Podcasting solo is different than live radio solo. So I knew I couldn't blow my shot here. So I was like, "Oh yeah, all the time," and I'd never have. Because I wasn't going to say no. I'm like, actually, I'm not comfortable with that. It's ESPN. And so they were like, okay, we have this one shift because no one is around. It's going to be your tryout. It's going to be 2 hours. And it's going to be on a Saturday afternoon. So I drove down to ESPN, I think 3 days ahead of time because there was a snowstorm. And I was like, there was no way I was going to allow anything to get in the way of my big break. And I stayed in a hotel across the street. That was just, I can't even believe it passed the health code back then. It was an old one. Marcellus knows what I'm talking about. And there was this huge snowstorm. And so I would drive across the street from the hotel to ESPN, and I would just sit at a computer and have somebody let me in because I didn't even have a security badge or anything. And then finally, after like the third day in a row that I was there on a Friday before the Saturday show, a guy was like, "What are you doing here every day?" I go, "I'm just prepping for the radio thing." He goes, the show's 2 hours. It's not like a series you're working on here. And I go, "Well, I just, I want to be ready because if I were nervous or anything, I would just over prepare." So they turn on and they're like, oh, right before they turned it on, this wasn't very good coaching, by the way, but they said, "Hey, at ESPN, when your time is up for that hour, at the end of the hour, the microphone turns off automatically. So the other times you're in control and you can say, all right, after the commercial," which we didn't say, but I'm not going to bore you to death with all that stuff, "or coming up next," that was up to you. But at the end of the hour, the machine would just shut it off across the entire country. And that was it. So you had to nail it to like that countdown in your head. So he says to me, "Good luck. If you're any good, I'll call you." He goes, "I'm going to leave now. I'll go back and listen to it. And if you're not done at 54 minutes at the end of the hour, it's going to cut you off mid-sentence and you're going to sound like an idiot." And I was like, great, thank you. I'm not already nervous enough. I talk a million miles an hour the first 2 segments. I mean, just, coming up, because I'm just so amped up and I'm nervous. And the producer's like, okay, settle down. I'm like, all right. And so the end of that first hour, I keep thinking, hey, 54, it's gonna cut you off. So, just make sure, be aware. I'm looking at the computer. 51, I'm rambling. I'm 52, rambling. 50, I'm like, okay. And I'm like, all right. And coming up next, blah, 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 blah. And I just stopped. I was like, I nailed it. Look at it. It says at 54 right there on the clock. And the producer goes, "What are you doing? We have 2 more minutes left. You sound," and I'm like, "And also coming up." And the clock was wrong. The clock was wrong on the computer. And there was another clock that you're supposed to pay attention to. The guy never told me that. I had 54 in my head for an hour straight. I thought I nailed it. I was like, man, first time, nailed it. And I completely screwed it up and sounded like an idiot. And I was but the thing is because I was so nervous about it, like I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. So you're going to be nervous the first time, but that's like a good nervous. It's that adrenaline of, hey, this is special. This is different. Right. And the podcast part, the thing that's great about that, guys, is you can make a mistake and we just edit it right out. So it's not live. So it's a good way to get used to it.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions in the chat, but I want to give John A, if you have a question. I know you haven't had a chance to ask one yet. I know you had some pretty cool ideas for your podcast ideas. I don't know if you want to ask any questions. You're on mute, by the way. You're on mute, Johnny.
I guess my question would be, if you're in your current profession, how do you stay true to who you are? I know you said like it's okay to push the envelope, but what does that look like for you?
Still low, keep it going.
I don't really, obviously I'm more comfortable now. You just do it like anything, you do something long enough, you feel a little bit more comfortable. But, I think pushing the envelope is when you see everybody saying one thing about a player or a team you know, in the world of sports for me. And I just go, hey, I think everybody's wrong, and here's why. And, you know, it doesn't make you any friends, but if you do a good job in making your point, like there was something that happened recently with a coach, and a bunch of people were screaming that this coach has never gotten a chance and it's ridiculous and on and on and on. And then I felt like everybody was just kind of repeating the same stuff, but nobody was really saying anything different. So I said, you know what, I've had it with this topic. I researched it. I made some phone calls, and I did like 7 minutes on it, and no one had done it the way I'd done it. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get crushed for this because I kind of stepped it up a little, or if people are going to appreciate the honesty, or whether or not they agree, or, you know, I don't know if I'm going to change anybody's mind or anything. And I got a bunch of texts from people that work with NBA teams being like, finally someone said what we've all been thinking, but no one said it. So, you know, maybe that's not entirely a answer. Sometimes there's stuff in all professions where, you know, I've tried different shows, I've tried different roles and that kind of stuff. But as far as the topics, you know, that's at least something for me where I'll look at what everyone's saying in every direction that they're going in on a topic. And I'll try at times to not just be somebody that wants to disagree, but figure out if there's something that people are missing.
Awesome.
Okay, Cameron, really quick. So we definitely want to respect Ryen and Marcellus.
I can keep going for a little bit here.
Can you?
So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I know Marcellus. I know you gotta leave shortly, right?
Yeah, I got a few minutes too. I just gave my man some Pirates Booty Smart Food. He good.
Okay, all right. So yeah, let's take a couple more questions, Cameron. We got some in the queue.
Yeah, I know Denari had one. Looks like his video cut out. So maybe I'll go to Kamiko first. Since you're there, looks like you have another question in the chat.
Is she on?
Yeah.
My other question is it's a two-part question. It's what are some things you've done to become a better interviewer? And what are some characteristics that make a good interviewer?
Oh, wow. Ryen might know his name. What's his name? Sawatsky?
Yeah, Sawatsky. Yeah. We used to have to take this seminar that was 8 hours a day, 3 days in a row. I didn't think we needed to spend 24 hours to learn how to ask what happened next. I felt like it could have been a little quicker, but there's two things that I think that I've picked up on, because he disagreed with some of the stuff with me, and I go, look, you're doing 60 minutes questions timeline. I'm doing radio live on the fly. Sometimes I have to jolt it a little bit. Listening is the #1 skill of a great interviewer. Most of the people, I'm telling you, people that are really successful, that have huge jobs, not just in sports, I'd say half of them are terrible listeners. They've already thought it out so much. They have the 5 or 6 questions they're going to ask, especially if it's live. If it's edited, if you look like a bad interviewer, that's on the producers. But they don't listen. There's so many times where if you're listening to the answer of the question that you've already asked, you're going to get something out of that where you go, oh, wait. And then everything you could written down, you may not even use. And that's something when you're younger, you'll think, well, I spent all this time writing all this stuff down. Obviously I have to use it. That's not always the case. So listen to the answers. I know that sounds incredibly simple and almost stupid to remind you. It's weird. Like I had bad habits where I'd go, you're not really even listening. You're just gearing up for your next question. And then #2 would be, I did this. I wanted everybody to know how smart I was and how much I studied. And I wasn't really asking a question as much as I was trying to show off, where I would ask this super long thing that was sort of a statement and then go, huh? Or thoughts. And you'd be like, that's not. The quicker the question, the more the simplest questions are usually the best questions.
Yeah, I agree with that. I didn't think we needed to be there for 24 hours either with Sawatsky, but my takeaway from him was make sure that your questions allow who you're interviewing to answer them, and they can't be yes or no's. So, you know, the questions where they don't make them closed in.
Open stuff.
Yeah.
What happened?
I love that point, because if you ask someone a question, did you win the game? Yes or no? But if you say, how did you guys win the game? Ain't no yes or no's now. You're going to get something from them. And those questions, I try to make sure that, like Ryen was saying, our business is a lot different than his static way of instructing it. Like we really have to get in and out of there. But the part about listening and not just be waiting to talk again, but actually listening in that time is amazing. Some of the top people, like he said, are not good listeners. Therefore, it's not the best interview. Yeah, it will suffice. Yeah, it's fine. But in terms of really going there, it's interesting. So you got LeBron in front of you and you're like, LeBron, you just won the championship. Talk to me about it. Oh, it was great. He's thanking his teammates. And then you're like, so how did you accomplish this goal at this age? And he's like, well, I'm in a better situation. Now, if your next question is, so what are you going to do after you go home versus, wait a minute, better situation. What are you saying about other situations? Like, that's where you may not have been scripted to go there, but he may have given you something that's better than your next question of, so what are you going to do to celebrate in the bubble? So there are times when you can hear something that may take you down a different path to do that. And other than that, really don't over prepare. Like, give yourself the room to actually go out there and be in the moment and cook up something different. I like that. I learned that from DJing. DJing used to be grab your crates, go to the party. You only have so many crates you bring in, and you got to play between these many songs. Then Serato came, and you got the whole world at your disposal on that laptop. You can play any song ever. And what happens is you overthink it. It's like paralysis by analysis. You're like, well, I can go here, I can go here, I can go here, I go. And then next thing you know, it's time to transition, brother. What's next? And it actually was easier when I had less in front of me. It was, because now you just have too many options. So make sure you're not too much in your own head. You're actually listening to the words coming out of their mouth.
A good follow-up that too, and I'll make it quick. If you're interviewing somebody, okay, say it's a family member, or however you decide, topically you want to attack this podcast program. If you ask, say, somebody older, all right, somebody, another generation you look up to, and you say, hey, it was a lot different when you were in high school, wasn't it? Okay, well, now they're sort of boxed in and they'll say, yes. Okay. Instead, very simple rule, you would say to them, how was it different when you were a kid in high school? So now they can go in a bunch of different directions and you might get an answer that you weren't even thinking. Now, you'd hope the guest is nice enough to figure out, like, oh, okay, I'm not just going to say yes or no when you ask them those questions, but there are very simple rules and understanding. Just if you can ask it in a way, if I say to Marcellus, hey, what happened after you retired? Okay, well, who knows? He's going to go where he wants to go. If I say to Marcellus, hey, when you retired, it was probably tough for you, wasn't it? And Marcellus might be like, well, maybe, but I also was probably sick of playing football. But now, you kind of cut me off on how much I can even answer. So it's not that complicated. It's just amazing how many people, even the biggest people in TV everywhere, I'll see it all the time. And look, I'll mess it up sometimes still too. Like, I'm so mad at myself and I'll go, hey, why did you just do that? You've been doing this almost 20 years. But it's a really simple thing to forget. And a lot of people are bad at it.
Yeah, a follow-up to a follow-up. I also heard never ask two questions because they will always answer the easier one.
or the last one. That happens all the time on those press conferences. Hey, two-parter, LeBron, you guys played great defense there early on, and then you guys were able to get Danny Green going. What was the difference? Almost no one remembers both questions.
Yep. Amazing.
Okay, looks like Denari's back. Go ahead, Denari. You can ask your question. Let's get some Wi-Fi issues.
And just take yourself off mute. There you go.
Okay, so my question was, did you worry about others' opinion more than you worried about your own opinion when you first started?
Look at
That's so good.
That is. I would say this. No, not more than my opinion, but I certainly wanted to be well received and well liked. I wanted and to feel like I said something that was profound or smart. So yeah, my ego was totally involved. Not more, because I still believed enough of myself to say it and I was going to stand my ground. But I did want the world's reaction to largely agree with me. Duh. But I found myself in hot water early. And this is just because I was a rookie. You couldn't catch me slipping like this now, but my first year at ESPN, I had played for former head coach Mike Smith. He was our defensive coordinator in Jacksonville. They're not even talking about Mike Smith. They're talking about the Atlanta Falcons. Will they be good, great, whatever. Not even focused on the coach as much, just the talent. And then I tell him a story about Mike Smith, how he was a dedicated coach, good coach, kind of no nonsense, but at the same time, it was a little tough working with him and Jack Del Rio, because Jack Del Rio was a former D coordinator, and they kind of like, not butt heads, but they certainly wouldn't share the baton politely. So it was funny, that shifted into, oh, so there was issues in Jacksonville. I was like, well, not really. It's just like when you have someone who did your job and now you're doing their job, it's kind of like a weird transition. And I forget who it was, but they said, so was it like a circus in Jacksonville? And I was like, nah. I didn't give an answer, and we moved on. Headline, Marcellus says Jacksonville was a circus because of Mike Smith. And I'm like, oh, snap. So just in that moment, I kind of realized, even though you may have so many repetitions in this, and I don't know how many words I've said in terms of commentating, but it's in the thousands, millions, billions. Make sure that you mean the words you're saying, no matter how many you say, because you think no one's watching or no one's listening, or only 4 people in the studio, whatever it may be. Once it hits the masses, oh, they're going to have a chance to talk about that and dissect it in a lot of different ways. So that moment let me know the sense of importance of everything I say, and even the context in which it's being conveyed.
Yeah, that's way more because Marcellus was doing some stuff before he showed up to ESPN that people actually cared about. So that's a really good
Right.
lesson. But I mean, you were asking though about the haters' opinion. Is that what you're saying there? Because I just want to make sure I caught that correct.
Yeah.
You know, man, like it's crazy because when I'll look at some of the stuff people say to me, and I'll think like, man, if I were younger, you know, I probably would do whatever like we didn't have that back then to yell at athletes, you know, and if I were in college or in high school, you know, maybe I would have said something nasty because I was younger. But when I look at what happens is there's a weird dynamic that when you're successful, people what they're doing is they're showing their own frustration. And it's such an incredible waste of time that when I see a young kid hating on me and sometimes making it really nasty, I think like, gosh, instead of being mad because I've mellowed as I get a little bit older, I go, I wish I could pull this kid aside and just say, hey, you're going to be a certain age, and go, what a waste of time. Like, why would I say something nasty to somebody who I'm never going to interact with? Like, why should I should look at other people's success and be motivated by it, not like have these negative feelings. You know, you shouldn't be mad about other people's success, even if you don't like the person, you don't think they deserve that job. That kind of stuff should drive, like, hey, that person did that. Okay, well, I want to go ahead and do some of that stuff. So, you know, I'm not saying I'm perfect, certainly, and I look at it differently because in an age of social media where the last 10 years I could just pick up my phone and see somebody insulting me if I want to. I think that the hater part of it is really about the person more so than it's ever you. So, man, you can't, if you get to that level, man, you can't ever worry about those people. In a way, you'll get to the point where you're like, man, you're just going to be negative all the time. Like, this is what you want to do on social media, on Instagram. And like, I'll get DMs on Instagram from people and I'll just think like, why would you take this time out of your day to do this? Like, I'm not going to interact with you. And I'm not saying I would even understand that at 15 or 20 years old. So I don't want to sound like a hypocrite at all. But when you really break it down, you're thinking, so this person's this upset about themselves that they want to make me feel bad about myself. Like, it's really silly, man.
Silly.
So great response. Thanks, Ryan. I know that's something that Marcellus talks about a lot too. You often highlight the concept of giving more energy to the people, to your cheerleaders, as opposed to those that don't.
Totally, man.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So let's got enough time for maybe one more question, and then obviously we'll let Ryan and Marcellus go ahead and drop off. So do we have one more question for him from the students? Anybody? Minda, do you have any questions? Oh, who's that? Who was that? Did I miss somebody?
I thought Janae was speaking. She's on mute. She had a question. Oh, she was? Okay. There's a few in the chat. I don't know if we want to use, but yeah, go ahead, Minda.
Minda, do you have any questions? And by the way, guys, Minda's one of our co-founders for the Limitless initiative. and obviously the Limitless Incubator podcast. So she's just been sitting tight and quiet. So I know she has a couple of questions I think she wanted to bring forth.
I think it would be nice if you could share with us how you built your audiences from zero to where they are now, because we're all just starting out and we don't really know how to go about doing that.
For me, I would say the greatest attribute outside of having the passion to do it, you have the opportunity with the podcast and the incubator to actually get out there. As Ryen was saying, you could be out there today if you want to, is also the fulfillment. I think what separates people outside of talent and platform is fulfillment. Like, are you there? Are you reliable? Because as a listener, as a viewer, they have habits, and if they can count on you, not only in your sensibilities and your expression, your entertainment value, your educational value, everything you're presenting, but you're going to continue to present it. Like, I've seen people who are much, much less talented, like so different in disparity in talent, but one person is working and the other person is just like popping off here and there. And then you look at their followings, you're like, why is that person more popular than others? That's what it is, I think, is the fulfillment. Like, just the fact that McDonald's knows it doesn't have the best hamburgers. It's not even trying to enter that competition. They're just like, look, we're going to be everywhere when you're hungry. So what you going to do? You know, oh, you like something else better, but good luck getting to that. And you don't want to be that distant but better podcaster. Like, oh, I love her, but when's the next one dropping? And then someone else has that time to kind of steal your attention. So fulfillment on top of everything else.
You can't get frustrated. You know, I have friends that have tried to do it on their own. I mean, Marcellus and I were lucky. He transitioned to ESPN and then Fox. So he has a lot of eyeballs on him. You know, I was lucky in that I transitioned to podcasting after having a national radio show for over a decade with your name on it. So you'd hope at that point, and you can kind of tell, you go, all right, well, I imagine there's some audience out there for me and they're going to follow me to the podcast. And that's what happened. But it's this opportunity, you know, the first part of it is to get in those reps and understanding how it works. And, you know, the great thing about doing some on-air stuff is that no matter what you want to be, that first one, you're just going to be better in 6 months. Okay. There's no way you can avoid that. You're never going to be as good as you want to be right away. So you don't worry about all that stuff. But as far as the audience thing goes, it's very, very hard to just kind of do it on your own. So what you hope to get to is that point where you're noticed enough that somebody else would want to bring you in. And I have some friends it's totally worked out for, and companies have brought them in and they do some revenue splits. Again, this is, you know, kind of way, way further on down the road. And then there's other people that, you know, get frustrated after 4 bad weeks of numbers. And then I notice, hey, they're doing one every other month. And then you go, okay, you know, I understand it's frustrating, but you kind of eliminated yourself before you allowed yourself to be eliminated from it. So,
yeah.
That consistency is very important, is what we're the takeaway from this. So just really want to kind of bring it to a conclusion at this point. Marcellus and Ryen, we really, really appreciate you guys carving out this time on a Saturday and partnering with this program. You know, I know the team, we're excited to get you guys on and get this this depth, wisdom, and experience from you guys. So really appreciate that. And obviously, you know, you'll be working with us moving forward, you know, popping in and out when you can to make sure that we're getting further down the track. So just want to take this time and really, you know, thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm really happy that Marcellus, you know, hooked me up with you guys, and you guys would take the time out of your Saturday to listen to us talk to you, you know, and I'm obviously, you know, Marcellus far more than I do, but when you guys are navigating through the topic part of this and all that stuff, just have the guys, the mentors, and they forward that information to me. Do not think there are bad ideas. You know, as I've transitioned to try to do some other things, writers will say to other writers, there's no such thing as a bad idea. That's not entirely true, but think of it that way. Okay. No, but think of this. We're not trying to be perfect here. We are trying to learn the process of doing it and have fun with this. Seriously, I know that sounds so simple and people would say that all the time. With sports, it's like, hey, have fun. Well, no, I want to win. With this, let's not worry about winning. You know, let's Let's have fun. Let's think of topics that you're passionate about, because there's stuff that I'll do where I go, do I even want to talk about this right now? Like, why the hell am I even prepping for this? This is your opportunity to tell a story or talk to someone or do that kind of stuff. You're like, hey, this is actually something I'm interested in, because your effort will improve because you're excited about it. And that should be the first thing. Was you guys are going to work with everybody trying to do topics and pitching and, hey, will this work? Will this work? Make sure it's something you actually want to think about. Because if you pick something you don't even want to do, then why are we even doing this? So right. I can't wait.
That's real, Ryan. And in conclusion for me, man, thanks, Brandon. You're my guy. Shout out to Chris, my dog. Great seeing you too. And I'm really happy about this relationship, really about the ground we can cultivate. What do they say? Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
I'm right.
So you better think you can.
Absolutely.
In all of my endeavors, perseverance doesn't get enough credit. Like just staying in the race, survive, then thrive. My first episode ever at ESPN was ESPN News, like midnight shift. Like no one's watching, and that was on purpose because they want you to get your lumps. And I know you want to start off on the biggest, baddest platform ever, but learn yourself, learn your persona, which may be something that's different than your deep personality. Like, what are you working on to express? And I took my lumps, and it happened fast and it happened quickly, and I'm really happy and blessed. But it's okay if it starts slow. There were guys when I first got there, last story, when I first got there, I think our top crew was like Emmett Smith, and he doesn't even do it anymore. Michael Irvin, he's still in it and killing it. But Jerry Rice was there. Yeah. Jerry Rice and I used to talk, and Jerry was like, I am not made for this. And it's crazy. You will be out of your own body in envy of like, I want to be them. I want to be on that show. I want to do that. And you never know how it plays out. So survive, learn yourself, survive, and then thrive. That's the message.
It's funny too, because some of the best players, legends, they were like the worst at TV. It was unbelievable. I was automatic. They'd be like, oh my gosh, Jerry Rice, here's 3 years. And he'd be like, man, I don't even like doing this. Yeah. You would see him in the hallway at ESPN and you go, hey man. And he would like, look at you. I think Jerry got a little better. But this is not what we're talking about here. But yeah, look, my first shift was, I was getting done at 1 a.m. and I was driving back to Boston because they wouldn't pay for my hotel. And I would pay for it on my own when I wanted to stay over. If I had 2 shifts in a row, I was out of my own pocket. And I was getting $100 an hour to be on ESPN radio. So I'd make $300 and spend $120 on a hotel to get to make the $300 the next night. And then I'd get back to Boston 3 or 4 in the morning, and there was never any parking spaces. So I'd wake up to a ticket or a boot if I was behind on my tickets. So, it's cool to be saying, hey, I'm on ESPN, and you're going, I hope I have enough money for gas later. But, yeah, you can't worry about that stuff, because if you want it bad enough, none of it will matter.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks. We're going to have a quick wrap up, Cameron, with the team.
Yeah.
Well, you're on mute, Cameron.
With the students.
There you go. The students.
All right, guys. Take care, brothers.
Yeah. All right, Marcellus.
Thank you, guys.
Marcellus, all right, Ryan. Thank you, guys. Can't wait to see you again. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks guys. Yeah, great. Thanks, Ryan. We'll follow up with you.
Stay on, students. We've still got to.
Yes, students, hang on. There you go.
Perfect. Cameron and Charlton, you got it.
Okay. Do you still have the slides, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, so what we want to do just for the next probably 10, 15 minutes is we want to break you guys into your groups, and we really want you guys to hone in on your topics. So you can spend this time just to do a little bit of brainstorming, and while you're brainstorming, just think about kind of some of the things we heard from Marcellus and Ryan. Is this a topic that we all care about, number one? Because if you don't care about it, I think it'll be hard for it to be engaging and authentic. 2, is this a topic that we can speak about for at least a half an hour? And then 3, is this a topic that can be expanded or spread over 3 episodes? As we'll be doing 3 episodes to this podcast. So I think the first step you guys will have to do is talk to each other about the topics that you guys have in mind try to find something that where there's some overlap, where something that you guys can all care about. It may not be the thing that you care about the most, but just find some way to kind of compromise to come up with a topic. And the goal for this process is just to come up with what is your topic, because next week we're going to start with planning out our 3 shows, and so you're going to need your topics when you come into next week. So Chris, if you could throw us into the breakout rooms, we'll get started on that. When you guys get the notification, just press OK.
Okay, so let me, we're gonna have 3 rooms. And manually. And so in the first room, it is Denari, it is Allison. Sonali is not here. I'm gonna put Miss Dobie in there with you all. Second breakout room, we got Janae and Miko, and then I'm gonna put Minda. You want to go in with them again? Okay. And then the last breakout room, Caleb, Million, and Michael. Cameron, you want to go in with them?
Sure.
Okay. And I'm gonna put Charlton in there too. Hope I did this right. Give me a second, guys. It just popped out. Caleb, Charlton, Cameron, Michael. Okay. Okay, here it goes. All right, let me know if it didn't work. Brandon, I'm gonna try to see if I can get you to switch through the rooms like I do.
Okay.
Can you see? Nothing popped up for you, right?
I just see you and the 2 of us right
Okay,
now.
so can you go down to, do you see where it says breakout rooms down in yours at all?
I don't see it. It says, yeah, I don't see breakout rooms.
Okay. We'll have to figure out how to do this, man.
Okay.
So
everybody else, they're in their rooms right now?
Yeah, it looks like except for Million. Well, no, Million's name is, he's in the breakout room. Do you want to just go into one?
Yeah, you just put me in one of them.
Okay, I'm gonna put you in with Val then.
Okay.
Get it? There we go.